Hello and welcome to Love Lust Betrayal. Before starting the story, please subscribe and press the bell icon. Let's start the story. John Smith is my name. I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to Emily for 6 years. At 32, she has the beauty, charm, and vitality of someone in her mid-20s. That was my initial thought. Anyway, we had no children. She wasn't ready, but I was. She would say, I disagree with the notion that indifference is the antithesis of love. This deep-seated anger is what keeps me awake at night. I wouldn't even spit on her to extinguish the flames if she was burning. I know you're wondering how I got here, how a loving husband turned into a man who plotted his wife's destruction. It began with a business. Emily always dressed to impress at last year's Christmas party. For these items, I'll admit that there was a part of me that enjoyed her ability to draw attention. I would think, yeah, that's my wife, as I watched all the men in the room swoon over her. But something didn't feel quite right that night. Maybe a bit too much, but she was wearing this slinky black dress that fit her perfectly. I kept wondering who she was attempting to win over. Look, Emily, these parties get wild. People drink too much and lines get crossed. I said to her as we were getting ready, please don't let anything happen that would make me appear foolish. She chuckled. Come on, John, you know I love you. Don't be so serious. The first thing I did wrong was to push it. I trusted her. Her boss, James Wilson, greeted us as soon as we arrived at the party. James is the type of person who is constantly on the verge of going too far. As the company's vice president, he is tall, self-assured, and conceited, acting as though he controls the world. Years ago, his wife, who was presumably tired of his antics, stopped attending these events. He took her hand and said, Emily, you look gorgeous tonight, utterly ignoring me. Emily just gave me her laid-back John look, but I wanted to slap that smug expression off his face right there. Throughout the night, James kept an eye on her, looking for reasons to touch her arm or get too close. It was nothing, I told myself repeatedly. That was not Emily. She wouldn't treat me with such disrespect, would she? I lost her somewhere in the middle of the night. In an attempt to fit in and avoid worrying about Emily's whereabouts or her partner, I had been chatting with a few of the guys when her friend Rachel approached me. Have you seen Emily, John? She was moving to the music. I haven't seen her in a long jammies, but I was with James earlier. I felt sick to my stomach because of the way Rachel looked at me, as if she knew something but was afraid to express it. I began looking for her. Initially, I told myself I was just being paranoid, but then I heard it. A woman's breathy, distinct voice, muffled, coming from one of the side rooms. When I opened the door, I saw James grinning, her hunched over a desk with her black dress gathered around her hips. I just stood there for a moment, disappearing the moment he saw me. Cold, I had the sensation that my chest was giving way. God forbid, John, I must tell you. Emily stumbled and fumbled to lower her dress. You have nothing to explain, I said in a cold tone. You're finished. We've been redone. James stood up, attempting to get better. Let's not overreact, man. I interrupted him. Quit talking. Do you really think I have no idea what sort of jerk you are? You've spent years snooping around her, and you. I looked at Emily, but she was unable to look me in the eye. You allowed him to do so. James made an effort to appear tough by approaching me as though he would threaten me. Poor decision. I caught him by the collar and slammed him against the wall before he could say anything more. He wasn't that arrogant back then. I growled, listen, you piece of garbage. Not just tonight, but every day for the rest of your wretched life. You will regret this. It would have been too simple, so I refrained from punching him. Rather, I repeatedly gave him hard slaps until his arrogant grin turned to tears. He was lying on the floor, whimpering like the coward he was, when I finished. By then, my friends Paul and Eddie had arrived, most likely at Rachel's suggestion. They watched in stunned silence from the doorway. As they pulled him out, I said in a flat voice, "Get him out of here." I looked back at Emily, who had mascara streaming down her face and was crying. It was the first Jemmys since I'd met her that I felt nothing at all. I told her we were going out, so get your coat. Except for Emily's sporadic sniffles, the ride home was completely quiet. I kept my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road. Finally, with a trembling voice, she whispered, "John." I didn't respond. "Just give me a moment, John." It was an error. The word love was like a knife to the gut. I wasn't thinking, "I love you." "Cal," I said in a venomous voice, "you don't love me. I'm just your safety net, the person you turn to when you're done playing your little games. But you love the attention, the thrill, and the excitement of sneaking around." "Emily." She cried more intensely. "That is untrue. It had no significance. I was self-centered and foolish, but it made no difference. I applied severe pressure to the brakes and dragged the vehicle to the side of the road. I turned to her and said, "It didn't mean anything. Our marriage was ruined by you. I will always remember the way you betrayed me." "Emily. You're telling me it didn't matter that you publicly betrayed me?" I resisted her attempt to take my hand. "I'll do anything, John. Just give me a chance to make this right." "This cannot be fixed," I said icily. "You now have to live with the decision you made." I chose to take a detour rather than drive home. Emily saw right away, with a hint of fear in her voice. She asked, "Where are we going?" "You'll see," I said, avoiding eye contact with her. I arrived 10 minutes later. There was a car parked in the driveway and a porch light on in front of a small suburban house. "What's this, John? Who resides here?" Without responding, I walked to her side of the car, opened the door, and got out. "Get out," I firmly said. She paused, her gaze flitting from the house to me. "Leave." She wrapped her coat tightly around herself and reluctantly got out of the car. I walked her to the front door after taking her arm, not too firmly but enough to make it obvious she wasn't leaving. She was there when the door opened a few seconds after I knocked. "Wilson." "Claire," when James's wife asked, "Can I help you, Mrs. Wilson?" Her face lit up with worry and bewilderment. "I'm John Smith." I said in a courteous but firm tone, "I was employed by your husband's business once. Could we enter?" Her perplexity grew as she glanced at Emily and then at me. "Is everything all right? Is James okay?" "Oh, James is all right. Hune's just had a very eventful evening," I said, grinning sourly. With obvious caution, CLA moved aside and gestured for us to come in. Despite Emily's apparent desire to vanish into the floor, I held on to her arm tightly and guided her into the living room. "Please take a seat." With a nervous glance at Emily, Claire said, "No," I said, "thank you. It will not take long. My wife needs to tell you something." Emily's gaze expanded. "Panicked Ed, please don't tell her, John." I snapped. Clara's eyes darted suspiciously between us both. I stared at Emily, my face icy and uncompromising, as I dawned on her what was happening. "Tell her what you were up to tonight, Emily, or do you want me to do it for you?" Emily's bottom lip quivered. "James and I both say it." I let out a bark. She blurted out, tears running down her cheeks. "I was sleeping with your husband. I'm very sorry. I have no idea what I was contemplating." Claire's eyes narrowed into slits, and her face turned pale. I wasn't going to let Emily off the hook, no matter how long she hesitated. "Emily, tell her everything you know." She whispered, barely audible, "For years." CLA shook her head and laughed bitterly. She reiterated that she had been lying for years. "You only learned about it tonight." She turned to face me, her face a mix of pain and rage. The room was silent for a moment after I nodded, but then CLA got up, went to Emily, and gave her a slap so forceful she almost fell when I walked in on them at the office party. "Emily spat out at you, dirty CLA. I no longer want that cheating bastard, so you can have him." I took Emily to her sister's house after we left Claire's. She was crying the whole Jemmy's and pleading with me to change my mind. Through her tears, she said, "John, you don't have to do this. This is something we can resolve. We are able to fix it." "No," I said softly. "Emily, certain things cannot be fixed, and you broke it." I didn't bother to assist her when we got there. I gave her the house keys along with her belongings and told her, "Don't come back until tomorrow afternoon. I'll be gone by then. Goodbye, John." I turned back to the car and said, "Bye, Emily." I grabbed her panties, which I had previously placed in my pocket, and threw them in her face. As I drove away, she completely collapsed. It was almost morning when I got home to pack my final belongings. The pictures on the walls and the lingering smell of her perfume made it feel weird, like I was walking through the remains of a life that was no longer mine. It was all so familiar, but it didn't feel real, and it lingered in the air. I packed quickly because I didn't want to stay there any longer than absolutely necessary. I took one last picture of us on our wedding day before I left. I took it because I didn't want her to have it, not because I was sentimental. Proceedings for a divorce began almost immediately. As promised, I made a deal with her. We would divide the assets equally, without any drama or argument, but only if she didn't challenge the divorce and I wouldn't tarnish her reputation with accusations of adultery. She concurred. What was her option? She was aware that I had enough witnesses and proof to totally destroy her. Regarding James, I followed through on my other commitment by suing him for alienation of affection. Although it's an outdated law in some states, it's still in effect and intended for circumstances such as these. I wanted to make him look bad, not get money. The lawsuit garnered media attention. A former employee is suing the vice president of Wilson Industries for adultery. Before long, the board became involved. It turns out that a scandal that would tarnish their company's reputation did not excite them. In order to spend more Jemmys with his family, James had to step down. Oh, and his family didn't survive for very long. After their divorce, Claire took the house, the children, and a sizable portion of his savings. He was unemployed, living in a one-bedroom apartment, and drowning in child support and alimony when I last heard from him. Couldn't have happened to a more kind person. The grass isn't greener on the other side, as Emily quickly discovered when she attempted to move on. A few strategic conversations helped spread the word about her affair like wildfire. She lost more than a husband. She lost her reputation. We had friends in common. Her once supportive family was appalled by what she had done. Her pals ceased answering her phone. In an instant, the ideal life she had taken for granted was gone. She made several attempts to contact me and beg for my forgiveness. I was wrong. "I'm so sorry," she would say to John. "I will always love you." I never answered. I didn't have to. Now, a year has passed. Although it hasn't entirely disappeared, the pain has subsided into a tolerable level. I attend therapy. People ask me if I'll ever trust anyone again after I've worked through the anger and betrayal, and honestly, I know they both received what they deserved. In all honesty, I have no idea, but I do know that I will never again accept anything less than what I deserve. I didn't realize I needed a second chance, but Emily gave it to me by ruining the life we had created together. As for her, I wouldn't trade the punishment of having to live with the results of her decisions every single day for anything.